Hello and welcome to this video looking at Shakespeare's reasons for writing Macbeth. Now, to get the top grades, you do need to understand the author's purpose in any text. Well, there are a lot of elements in Macbeth which are there just to please James I. So when Shakespeare wrote Macbeth in 1606, James I had been King of England for 3 years. It was well known that the new king was fascinated by witchcraft, and consequently Shakespeare created the Weird Sisters. Shakespeare might have been trying to win his approval by introducing the figures of the three Weird Sisters into the play. So an easy way to get into the top grades is to ask yourself, does Shakespeare actually believe in the power of the supernatural? Does he believe that the Weird Sisters have any supernatural powers at all? Or is he saying that Macbeth's descent into hamartia, into his tragic flaw, is that entirely produced by his own character? If you do argue that, then you really are arguing for a really subtle game, because on the one hand, his play needs to appear as though it's supporting an attack on witchcraft, but on the other hand, you'll be suggesting that he doesn't believe witchcraft exists. Well, is there any historical information that will help us? Well, in 1597, King James I, who was then just King of Scotland, wrote his book called, well, a pamphlet really, called Daemonologie. I'm going to read it to you. This is the actual words that King James wrote with the original spelling. Remember, there were no dictionaries in Shakespeare's time, so spellings weren't set. Many of them depended on the writer. So, the fearful abounding at this time in this country of these detestable slaves of the devil, the witches or enchanters, hath moved me, beloved reader, to dispatch in post this following treatise of mine, not in any wise, as I protest, to serve for a show of my learning and ingine, but only, moved of conscience, to press thereby so far as I can, to resolve the doubting hearts of many, both that such assaults of Satan are most certainly practised, and that the instruments thereof merits most severely to be punished, against the damnable opinions of two principally in our age, whereof the one called Scott, an Englishman, is not ashamed in public print to deny that there can be such a thing as witchcraft. So in my purple here, you can see that it's different from what you might expect. We're used to images of trials of witches, and we assume that in this period, people believed in witchcraft, and they were superstitious. But King James is writing because people are starting to doubt that witches actually exist. He's writing this because intellectuals like this Englishman, whose name is Scott, has actually written a book claiming that there's no such thing as witchcraft. So now you have some historical evidence to look at the play and say, well, what did Shakespeare believe? Shakespeare, of course, is incredibly literate, and he's reading many of the books published at the time. And of course, there aren't that many. If you're a literate individual at this time, you really can keep up with most of the books published in your lifetime. So as you consider the witches, you really are going to ask yourself, does Shakespeare present them in a way in which they're really supernatural? Well, remember, they never tell Macbeth to do anything evil. They don't tell him to do anything evil at all. In fact, the only reference to evil is, by the pricking of my thumbs, something wicked this way comes. And the witches are actually referring to Macbeth. So one reading of the play is that the witches are much less evil than Macbeth is. Macbeth is the agent of all the evil in the play. Well, we can set that against the message that he's giving King James. So the initial and subsequent publications of Daemonologie included a previously published news pamphlet detailing the accounts of the North Berwick witch trials. So this was in Scotland, while King James was King of Scotland. that involved King James himself, as he acted as the judge over the proceedings. So he condemned witches. The deputy bailiff to the Kingdom of Scotland, David Seaton, had a servant named Gaelis Duncan, who was found to have miraculously helped any who were troubled or grieved with sickness or infirmity. So you can see an interesting game going on here in the names. Uh, King Duncan is, of course, reminiscent of this character um, who was tried as a witch. And the person who's helped try him, David Seaton, has the same surname as one of Macbeth's servants. Seaton, I say, that he's the one who has to bring the armour to Macbeth. Um, and so Macbeth is ingratiating himself with King James by using names from King James's own past, and not just from his past, from his involvement in witch trials, to populate his play. He's having an in-joke with King James. David Seaton examined her as a witch, that's Gaelis Duncan, and obtained a confession that caused the apprehension, that means the arrest, of several others later declared to be notorious witches. Agnes Thompson confessed before King James to have attempted his assassination using witchcraft on more than one occasion. And so here we have a historical link of the witchcraft to the idea of assassinating a king. And that fits exactly, doesn't it, with the Weird Sisters and the attempted assassination, well, the actual assassination by Macbeth. However, in Macbeth, it's quite clear that Macbeth himself chooses to kill the king. Shakespeare introduces this idea of the dagger um, to give King James and other members of the audience the opportunity to see the dagger as a creation of the witches. It's a symbol of their supernatural power and they're controlling him. But really subtly at the same time, he gives Macbeth the words, "Is this but a dagger of the mind?" In other words, he allows us to think that Macbeth himself has created the image of this dagger um, through his own psychological anguish at committing this incredible sin. And this means you can argue either way, which way you think Shakespeare is going. Does he believe in witchcraft and then he's using this to ingratiate himself with the king? Or is he in fact more Machiavellian than that? Does he actually reject witchcraft himself, but pretend to believe in it in order to ingratiate himself, but at the same time leave enough clues for us to work out that actually he doesn't believe in witchcraft at all? Another piece of evidence we can use is Holinshed's Chronicles. So Holinshed is a historian who's writing sort of 20 odd years before Macbeth's written, and it's to Holinshed's Chronicles that Shakespeare turns in order to get the story of Macbeth and Banquo and the killing of Duncan, because these are based on true events. Well, look at this picture. This is actually in Holinshed's Chronicles, and this is Macbeth and Banquo meeting the three weird sisters. Well, you can see here that the weird sisters are richly attired. They're wearing glamorous clothes for the time, and they're young. They don't appear old. They don't appear like hags at all. Um, so Shakespeare plays with this idea when he creates them as almost caricature-like figures. He said, "What are you? You know, so withered in your attire." Um, he calls them hags. He asks if they are in fact female because they appear to have bearded faces. And so one way of looking at that physical portrayal in the play is to show that he doesn't believe in them at all. He's created something ridiculous that people never see. Um, so you can choose that interpretation if you wish, particularly because it departs so clearly from the historical portrayal of witches in Holinshed's Chronicles. It becomes simply Shakespeare's way of saying, look, there are no such things as witches. You don't see them looking like this because they don't exist. In my next video, you'll see just how clever Shakespeare is in maintaining this duality. On the one hand, suggesting that Macbeth and Banquo are influenced by the weird sisters who do have supernatural powers, and on the other hand, presenting enough evidence to say actually they have no supernatural influence whatsoever, and that all the tragedy is caused by Macbeth himself.